Dad, we need to be realistic. My son said that less than an hour after we buried my wife. I was still wearing the same black suit from the funeral. The flowers were still sitting on the dining room table. My wife's favorite coffee mug was still beside the sink exactly where she had left it. And yet my 3 children were already talking about money. The beach house is just sitting there, my daughter Jennifer said. Nobody uses it. We should sell it. I remember looking around the room, waiting for someone to say this wasn't the right time. Nobody did. Your mother isn't even gone a full day, I said quietly. Michael sighed and rubbed his forehead. Dad, that's exactly why we're bringing it up now. We need to start handling things. Handling things. That's what he called it. 28 years of memories reduced to paperwork. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. If this story speaks to your heart, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Leave your city, your country, and your local time in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing where people are listening from. My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 74 years old, and this is the story of the week that changed everything I thought I knew about my wife, my children, and my own family. And the lesson I learned by the end of it still stays with me today. So stay with me until the end. And now let me tell you where it all began. The funeral had ended that afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. Friends had gone home. Neighbors had stopped bringing casseroles. The house had become quiet in a way I wasn't prepared for. Evelyn and I had been married for 51 years. 51 years. That's longer than some people have been alive. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. Her reading glasses on the side table. Her gardening gloves hanging by the back door. The small blanket she always folded neatly over her favorite chair. I sat in the living room staring at that empty chair while my children sat across from me discussing assets. Dad, you know none of us are going to use that place, Jennifer said. Property taxes alone make it a bad investment. It's falling apart, Daniel added. The realtor said we'd be lucky if we waited another year. I looked at him. You already talked to a realtor? The room went silent for a second. Daniel shifted in his seat. Jennifer glanced at Michael. That was all the answer I needed. You talked to a realtor before your mother's funeral? I asked. We were just gathering information, Michael said quickly. Dad, don't make this into something it isn't. I didn't answer. I just looked down at my wedding ring. Evelyn used to squeeze my hand whenever family arguments started. She would always say, Tom, let them talk. Not every battle needs a winner. But she wasn't there anymore. Jennifer leaned forward. Dad, please don't take this personally. It's just a house. Just a house. I nearly laughed. That little beach house on Tybee Island had been where we spent summers when the kids were young. It was where Evelyn taught Jennifer how to ride a bike. It was where Michael caught his first fish. It was where Daniel learned how to swim. It was where my wife and I sat on the porch every anniversary and watched the sun disappear into the Atlantic. Just a house. Your mother never thought it was just a house, I said. Nobody replied. A few moments later they left. One by one. Hugs. Quick goodbyes. Promises to call. The house became silent again. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I walked into our bedroom and opened Evelyn's closet. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted to smell her perfume one more time. Maybe I wasn't ready to accept she was gone. That's when I noticed something strange. Tucked behind a stack of sweaters was a small wooden box I'd never seen before. My wife and I had shared everything for more than 5 decades. Or at least I thought we had. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside was an old brass key attached to a faded tag. And written on that tag, in Evelyn's handwriting, were 6 words that made my stomach drop. For your last visit, Tom. I sat on the edge of the bed holding that brass key for a long time. The bedroom was dark except for the lamp on Evelyn's nightstand. My eyes kept returning to the tag. For your last visit, Tom. Not your next visit. Not when you are ready. Your last visit. There was something final about those words that unsettled me. I opened the wooden box again, hoping I had missed something. Under the key was a folded photograph. The edges were worn and faded from age. It showed the beach house nearly 30 years ago. The paint was fresh. The porch swing was new. Jennifer could not have been older than 10. Michael stood beside me holding a fishing rod almost as tall as he was. Daniel was covered in sand and grinning at the camera. And there was Evelyn standing in the center with one hand on my shoulder. I could almost hear her laugh. I turned the photo over. On the back she had written a date and a single sentence. Some things are worth protecting, even when nobody understands why. I stared at those words until nearly 2 in the morning. The next day, Jennifer called before I had finished breakfast. "Dad, have you thought any more about the listing?" she asked. "Your mother passed away 3 days ago," I said. "I know," she replied. "I am just trying to help you stay ahead of things." Help. Everybody kept using that word. "Did your mother ever tell you why she kept going back?" I asked. There was a pause. "Going back where?" "The beach house." "No," Jennifer said. "Honestly, Dad, I always thought it was strange." Strange. She would disappear for a few days every few months and never explain anything. That surprised me. "You never asked?" Jennifer laughed softly. Mom never answered questions she did not want to answer. That was true. Evelyn had a gentle way of ending conversations without seeming rude. I spent the rest of the morning going through old photo albums. Something started bothering me. The children remembered the beach house very differently than I did. To them, it was an old property. To me, it was the center of our family for years. I found pictures of birthday parties on the deck, 4th of July cookouts, Christmas mornings when we spent the holiday by the ocean instead of in the city. Then I found something else. In dozens of photographs taken over nearly 3 decades, Evelyn was often there alone, standing beside the porch, holding gardening tools, smiling next to people I did not recognize. Men, women, children, entire groups. I frowned. Who were they? I pulled out another box from the closet. Inside were old receipts, postcards, and travel notes. Most were ordinary. Gas stations, grocery stores, hardware stores near Tybee Island. But one receipt caught my attention. It was only 6 years old. The charge was for lumber and building materials worth several $1,000s. I checked another, then another. More materials, paint, roofing supplies, garden equipment. None of it made sense. The house had supposedly been sitting empty all these years. That evening, Michael stopped by. He found me sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. "Dad, what are you doing?" he asked. "Trying to understand your mother." He smiled sadly. "Good luck with that." I held up one of the receipts. "Did you know she was spending money on the beach house?" Michael barely glanced at it. "Probably maintenance. Thousands of dollars? Maybe." Then he shrugged. "Honestly, Dad, whatever it was, it is over now." I looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I think Mom loved that place because of memories. That is all." After he left, I sat alone in the quiet house again. I looked at the photograph, then at the key, then at the words written on the back. Some things are worth protecting, even when nobody understands why. For the first time, a thought crossed my mind that I could not shake. What if Evelyn had not been visiting that house because of the past? What if she had been protecting something in the present? And if that was true, then my children were not just wrong about the house. They were about to make a mistake they would regret for the rest of their lives. I did not sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph again. Evelyn standing in the middle of the beach house porch, smiling like she knew something none of us did. The next morning, I finally made a decision I did not expect for myself. I was going to Tybee Island alone. No calls to my children. No discussion. Just me and the key Evelyn had left behind. Before I left, Jennifer called again. "Dad, we already spoke to a realtor," she said immediately. "He thinks we can get a good price if we list it this week." I stopped with my hand on the door handle. For the first time, I did not respond the way I always had. I did not argue. I did not explain. I simply said, "Not yet." There was silence on the other end. "What do you mean not yet?" she asked. "I am going there first." "Dad, that is unnecessary," she said quickly. "We already know everything about that place." "Do you?" I asked. She hesitated. "It is just an old house." That word again. Just. I ended the call without another sentence. It was the first time in years I had done that. The drive from Charleston to Tybee Island took just under 5 hours. The closer I got to the coast, the more the air changed. Salt. Warm wind. Familiar roads I had not driven in nearly 3 decades. I passed the old gas station where I used to stop for coffee with Evelyn. I passed the small diner where the kids once spilled orange juice across an entire table and laughed until they cried. Nobody in my family ever talked about those places anymore. They had erased them without realizing it. When I finally turned onto the narrow road leading toward the beach house, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. The trees were taller than I remembered. The road felt narrower. And then I saw it. The gate. Rusted. Weathered. Still standing. The same wooden fence line we had built together years ago. I parked the car and just sat there for a moment. The engine was still running. My hand was on the key, but I did not move. This was the moment I expected grief to hit me hard. But it was not grief I felt. It was something else. Curiosity. I got out of the car and walked slowly toward the gate. The air smelled like salt and pine. My shoes crunched against the gravel path. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. It felt heavier than it should have. Behind me, a voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, sir?" I turned around. A man in his 50s stood near the edge of the property. Work boots, baseball cap. He looked like someone who had spent a lot of time outdoors. "Can I help you?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said something that made me freeze slightly. "You must be Evelyn's husband." I blinked. "Yes," I said slowly. "I am." He nodded like that confirmed something for him. "She said you might come one day." I stared at him. "She said that?" He looked toward the house. We all knew she was waiting. I felt my chest tighten. "We?" I asked. He pointed gently past the gate. People she helped. People she brought here. I did not understand. My wife had always been private about this place. Or so I thought. I looked back at the gate, then at the key in my hand, then at the house beyond it. "What exactly is this place?" I asked quietly. The man did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped aside slightly, as if giving me permission to see for myself. "You should go inside," he said. I reached for the gate latch. My fingers hesitated for just a moment. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jennifer. "Dad, please call us back. We are serious about listing the property this week." I looked at the message. Then I looked at the gate. And for the first time since Evelyn died, I did not feel like I was following my past. I felt like I was about to step into something I had never been told existed at all. I slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Too smoothly. And as the gate began to open with a slow creak, I realized I had no idea what I was about to find waiting on the other side. I stepped through the gate and let it swing slowly behind me, the sound of rusted metal echoing across the empty yard. For a moment, I just stood there. The house was not abandoned like I expected. The porch was clean. The windows were intact. The grass was trimmed in uneven but recent lines, as if someone had been maintaining it carefully without professional help. I whispered to myself, "This cannot be right." The man from the road had followed a few steps behind me. He stopped at a respectful distance. "She would not want you to be surprised," he said quietly. I turned toward him. "What are you talking about? Who is maintaining this place?" He looked at the house instead of me. "People she trusted." That answer did not make sense, but before I could ask anything else, I heard voices coming from inside the house. My heart tightened. The front door opened before I reached the steps. A woman in her 40s stood there holding a set of keys. She looked at me carefully, then smiled like she already knew me. "You must be Thomas," she said. I nodded slowly. "Who are you?" "My name is Laura Bennett," she replied. "I was one of Evelyn's students." That word hit me harder than I expected. "Student?" I glanced back at the man behind me. He gave a small nod as if confirming it. Laura stepped aside. "She told us you might come someday, but not right away." I felt a cold confusion settle in my chest. "What do you mean she told you?" I asked. Laura hesitated before answering. "She prepared all of this." I walked into the house without fully realizing it. The living room looked different. Not remodeled, but lived in. Bookshelves lined one wall. Handmade furniture filled the space. On the coffee table were notebooks stacked neatly, each labeled with dates spanning years. My voice lowered. My wife was not here often. My children told me she barely visited. Laura looked at me carefully. "She was here every month," she said. I felt something shift inside me. "That is impossible," I replied immediately. "She would have told me." Laura shook her head gently. "She said you would not understand yet." I opened one of the notebooks. Evelyn's handwriting filled the pages. Names, notes, plans, donations. Entire communities of people I had never heard about. "What is all this?" I asked. Laura stepped closer. She started a program here almost 30 years ago. It began with children who needed tutoring, then families, then housing help. She turned this place into something much bigger than anyone realized. I flipped another page. My hands were starting to shake. "My children said this place was empty," I said quietly. Laura paused. "She asked us not to tell them." That sentence made me look up sharply. "Why?" I asked. Laura lowered her voice. "Because she did not trust what would happen to it after she was gone." The words hit me harder than anything else. I turned back toward the room. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar. even the air. So what exactly is this place now? I asked. Before Laura could answer, another voice came from the hallway. It is her life's work. I turned. An older man stepped forward holding a folder. He opened it slowly and placed it on the table. Inside were legal documents, signed letters, and financial records. My name appeared on some of them, but only as a secondary reference. Evelyn's name was on everything else. She created a foundation, the man said, and she funded it for decades using this property and her personal savings. I stared at the documents. My children said she was just maintaining a vacation house. I said, my voice barely steady. The man nodded. That is what she allowed them to believe. I felt my throat tighten. Why would she hide this from her own family? I asked. Laura looked at me, and her answer was quiet. Because she was afraid they would sell it the moment they understood its value. The room went silent after that. I looked down at the papers again. Then something slipped from between the pages. A letter. My name written on the front in Evelyn's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. As I unfolded it, I heard my phone ring in my pocket. It was Jennifer. I almost did not answer. But I did. Dad, where are you? She said immediately. Her voice was tense. We just got a call from a realtor in Georgia. He said you went to the property and met some people there. What is going on? I looked around the room filled with evidence of a life I never knew existed. My voice came out slowly. Your mother was not just maintaining a beach house, I said. There was a pause. What are you talking about? Jennifer asked. I looked at the letter in my hand, my chest tightening as I prepared to read the first line. And that was when I realized something had been hidden from all of us for decades. Something so large that everything I thought I knew about Evelyn, about this house, and about our family, was about to collapse in a single moment. I stood there in that house holding Evelyn's letter while the phone in my hand kept vibrating again and again. Jennifer had called 7 times in a row. Michael had left 2 voice messages. Daniel had sent a long text that I did not even finish reading. Every notification felt heavier than the last, like the world outside this place was trying to pull me back into a version of reality that no longer made sense. Finally, I answered another call. Jennifer's voice came through immediately, sharp and impatient. Dad, what are you doing in Georgia? The realtor said you were talking to strangers and refusing to cooperate. This is not the time to be emotional. I looked at the letter in my hand and slowly replied, I am not refusing anything. I am learning the truth. There was a pause, then Michael took the phone. Dad, listen to me, he said firmly. Whatever Mom told you about that place is not relevant anymore. It is just property. We need to move forward. I closed my eyes for a moment. You think she never told me anything about it? I asked quietly. She did not, Michael said immediately. We all know that. She never shared anything about that house except memories. I glanced around the room filled with documents, photographs, and records of a life none of them had ever seen. That is where you are wrong, I said. The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. Then Jennifer spoke again, her tone softer but still firm. Dad, please just come home. We will handle everything together. The realtor is ready to list it this week. I looked down at Evelyn's handwriting again. Her words were steady, almost calm, as if she had known I would reach this moment alone. I am not listing anything, I said. My voice surprised even me because it did not shake. It was the first time I had spoken that way in years. There was a sudden change in their tone. Michael sighed loudly. Dad, do not do this. You are making this harder than it needs to be. I finally said the truth I had been avoiding. Your mother was not just maintaining a vacation property. She built something there. Something none of you ever asked about. Jennifer responded quickly, almost defensively. That is not possible. We would have known. No, I said, you would not. That was when Daniel joined the call. His voice was quieter. Dad, what are you saying exactly? I looked at the stack of documents again, my hand resting on a ledger filled with names I did not recognize, but clearly mattered deeply to Evelyn. I am saying she spent nearly 30 years helping people there. People who depended on her. And she kept it hidden because she believed the moment you all understood its value, you would sell it without hesitation. There was no response for a moment. Then Jennifer let out a short laugh, but it was not a happy one. So what, Dad? She ran some kind of hobby project? That does not change anything. The house is still an asset. That word again. Asset. I felt something inside me shift, something I had ignored for too long. She did not see it that way, I said quietly. And neither do I. The line went silent. Then Michael spoke, his voice colder now. If you refuse to cooperate, we will have to take legal steps to protect the estate. I nodded slowly, even though they could not see me. Do what you think you need to do. And I ended the call. For a long time I just sat in the chair, staring at the letter in my hands. I tried calling back later that night, but none of them answered. Jennifer's phone went straight to voicemail. Michael's went unanswered. Daniel read my message, but did not reply. The next morning, I received an email from Jennifer's account. It was short. Dad, we have decided to proceed with the listing. Please do not interfere. It is what Mom would have wanted. I read that sentence several times. It is what Mom would have wanted. They were using her name like a tool, shaping her silence into agreement. He asked if I was all right. I told him I was not sure anymore. He nodded like he understood too much already and said, "She warned us this would happen." I asked him what he meant. He just looked at the house and said, "People do not always see what is right in front of them until it is too late." That night, I sat alone in the living room. No calls, no messages, no replies, just silence. Evelyn's letter was still open on the table, but I had not finished reading it. I could not bring myself to do it yet. Outside, the wind moved through the trees slowly, and for the first time since I arrived, I realized something unsettling had happened. Not only had my family stopped listening, they had already made their decision without me, and I was no longer part of it. I woke up on the fourth morning in Tybee Island with a strange kind of silence that felt heavier than sound. The house was still the same, the documents still spread across the table, but something inside me had shifted overnight. It was not shock anymore. It was recognition, the kind that comes when denial finally runs out of places to hide. I sat there for a long time before I opened Evelyn's letter again. This time I read it slowly, every line pressing deeper into me than before. Thomas, if you are reading this, then I am no longer there to explain everything the way I should have. I stopped halfway and closed my eyes. My hands tightened around the paper. There was a knock at the door that interrupted me. When I opened it, the man from the gate was standing there again. His name, I had finally learned, was Robert Hayes. He looked at me for a moment and said quietly, "You have not slept." I nodded. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, as if he already knew I would not refuse. "They called again," he said. I knew immediately who he meant. "My children," I said. Robert nodded. "They spoke to the realtor this morning. The listing is going live tomorrow." I sat down slowly, not from shock this time, but from something closer to exhaustion. "They are moving fast," I said. "They always do when they think they are right," Robert replied. I stared at the floor for a moment. "They think I am being irrational." Robert did not answer immediately. Then he said, "They only know a fraction of this place." I looked up at him. So did I. That was the first time I said it out loud. Not as confusion, not as question, as fact. Robert pulled a chair and sat across from me. "Evelyn did not hide this out of shame," he said. "She hid it because she knew how people measure value." I let out a slow breath. "My own children called it worthless," I said. Robert looked down. "They were not wrong in their world," he replied. "But they were never part of hers." That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. That afternoon, I tried calling Jennifer again. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message anyway. "Jennifer, I need you to come here before you make any decisions. There is something you need to understand." I hung up and waited. No reply. Later I tried Michael. Same result. Daniel did not even read the message this time. The silence from them felt different now. It was not confusion anymore. It was distance. The kind of distance that forms when people believe they already know the truth. That night, I walked through the house alone. Every room felt like it belonged to someone else now. I stopped in the kitchen where Evelyn used to stand every morning. I could almost hear her voice. "You think too much, Tom." I sat at the table and realized I had not eaten properly in days. I was not hungry. I was just aware that time was still moving without asking me to keep up. I found myself speaking out loud without meaning to. "What did you build here?" I asked the empty room. There was no answer. Only the sound of the house settling. I looked at the letter again. This time I read further. I did not stop. "Thomas, if you ever feel like you do not recognize me in what I have done, then that is because I did not want to be recognized in it while I was alive." I paused there. My breath slowed. For the first time, I felt something deeper than confusion. I felt distance forming between the person I thought I knew and the life she had actually lived. The next morning, Robert returned with a folder. He placed it on the table without speaking. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Evelyn with groups of people I did not recognize. Evelyn speaking at gatherings I had never been told about. Evelyn standing in front of buildings that did not exist in any memory I had. These were taken over the years, Robert said softly. I flipped through them slowly. My voice came out quieter than I expected. She never told me. Robert nodded. She told us not to tell you until she was gone. I closed the folder. Why? I asked again, but this time I was not asking for information. I was asking for understanding. Robert looked at me carefully. Because she knew that if you knew too early, you would try to stop her. I sat back in the chair. For a long moment, I did not respond. Not because I was angry, not because I was in disbelief, but because something inside me had finally started to accept that my life with Evelyn had contained an entire world I had never been invited into. That afternoon, I received one final message from Daniel. It was short. Dad, we are going ahead with the sale. We think it is best for everyone. I read it twice. Then I placed the phone on the table and did not pick it up again. Outside, the wind moved through the trees the same way it had every day since I arrived. But now it felt different. Not empty. Not heavy. Just final in a way I was no longer fighting. And for the first time since Evelyn died, I stopped waiting for my children to understand and instead began to realize I might have to understand everything alone before anything could ever change again. I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had slept well, but because my mind no longer allowed me to stay still. The house was quiet, yet it no longer felt empty in the same way. It felt occupied by something I was only beginning to understand. Robert was already outside when I opened the door, leaning against his truck with a folder in his hand. He did not speak right away, just handed me a simple paper schedule. You do not have to stay confused, he said. You can start small. I looked down at the schedule. It listed meetings, visits, and something called community review sessions. This is Evelyn's work, I said quietly. Robert nodded. It is still her work, but it has been waiting for someone to stop treating it like a mystery and start treating it like responsibility. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I followed him into town that morning. The building was modest from the outside, almost easy to miss. Inside, it was nothing like what I expected. People were working, talking, organizing papers, and helping visitors without hesitation. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled as if she already knew I belonged there. You must be Thomas, she said. I nodded slowly. Evelyn spoke about you often, she added. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. Inside, Laura was sorting through files. When she saw me, she paused. We were not sure you would come back after yesterday, she said. I placed my hands on the table. I do not think I have anywhere else to go right now, I replied. She studied me for a moment, then handed me a stack of folders. Start here, she said simply. No explanations. No instructions beyond that. For the first time in days, I did not feel like I was being pushed into understanding something. I was being allowed to participate in it. I spent the next hours going through records. Names of families. Notes about assistants. Small handwritten updates in Evelyn's handwriting mixed with others I did not recognize. At noon, Robert walked in and placed a list beside me. You should come with me this afternoon, he said. We are meeting one of the families she helped years ago. I agreed without hesitation. The drive was short. A small house on the edge of town. A woman in her 60s opened the door and froze when she saw me. You are Evelyn's husband, she said softly. I nodded. She smiled immediately, but there was sadness behind it. She helped me keep my house, she said. I did not think I would ever meet you. I did not know what to say at first, so I just listened. She told me how Evelyn had shown up years ago when she had nowhere else to turn. How she had quietly arranged help without asking for recognition. How she always said the same thing before leaving. Do not thank me. Just keep going. On the drive back, Robert spoke without looking at me. She never wanted credit, he said. She wanted continuity. I looked out the window. The coastline blurred past us slowly. I spent my whole life thinking I knew her, I said. Robert replied, you knew her, just not all of her. That night, instead of sitting alone in the house, I stayed at the center until late. Laura brought me coffee and sat across from me. You are working faster than most people expect, she said. I let out a quiet breath. I do not think I have a choice anymore, I replied. She smiled slightly. That is how she started too. I paused. She told you that? Laura nodded. She said she did not plan to build anything. She just could not ignore people once she saw them. I looked down at the table. My children still think I am going to sell this place, I said. Laura did not respond immediately. Then she said, "People only understand what they can measure." I stayed there longer than I intended, organizing files, reading notes, learning names. Slowly, something inside me began to shift. Not recovery, not yet, but recognition. That I was not just uncovering Evelyn's life. I was being given a place inside it, even if I had arrived too late to fully understand how it began. As I left the building that night, Robert was waiting outside again. "You will be needed here tomorrow," he said. I nodded. For the first time, I did not ask why. I simply accepted it. And as I walked back toward the house under the quiet coastal sky, I realized that something in me was no longer waiting for permission to move forward, because for the first time in a long time, I could see a future forming that did not depend on what I had lost, but on what I had finally begun to understand. I arrived at the center early that morning, before anyone else had turned on the lights. The building was still quiet, but it no longer felt unfamiliar to me. In a strange way, it felt like it had started recognizing me back. On the desk in front of me sat a small folded badge. I picked it up slowly. Thomas Walker, Field Coordinator. It was simple, almost modest, but the weight it carried was different from anything I had worn in years. Robert walked in a few minutes later and stopped when he saw me holding it. "They finalized it," he said. I looked at him. "Finalized what?" He nodded toward the badge. "You are officially part of the team now." I did not respond immediately. I just fastened the badge onto my shirt. The clip made a soft click that felt louder than it should have. Laura entered next, carrying a stack of schedules. When she saw me, she paused and gave a small approving nod. "We have a field visit today," she said. "I think you should lead it." I almost laughed, but I did not. "Lead it," I repeated. She placed the papers down. "You already know more than you think you do. You just never called it experience before." The morning passed in a way I did not expect. I was not observing anymore. I was speaking, organizing, making decisions. People listened when I spoke, not because of authority, but because I had started to understand what they needed before they said it out loud. During a short break, a younger volunteer approached me. "Mr. Walker, can I ask you something?" she said. I nodded. "Why did you come here?" The question was simple, but I took my time answering. "I came here because I thought I was closing a chapter of my life," I said. She looked at me carefully. "And now?" I glanced around the room. People working, talking, building something that had been quietly alive long before I arrived. "Now I think I was left out of the real story for a very long time," I said. She smiled slightly and went back to work. That afternoon, Robert took me to a small meeting with local partners. I wore the badge without thinking about it anymore. When we entered the room, a few people stood up to greet us. One of them shook my hand firmly. "So you are the man Evelyn always spoke about," he said. I hesitated. "She spoke about me?" He nodded. "Not often, but when she did, it was with certainty. She always said you would understand eventually." That sentence stayed with me through the entire meeting. Later, as we walked back to the car, Robert spoke quietly. "You are starting to change how people see this place," he said. I shook my head slightly. "I am just trying to understand it." "That is exactly what she did," he replied. The days after that began to form a rhythm. Morning meetings, site visits, paperwork that slowly started to feel less like information and more like memory. I stopped checking my phone as often. My children still did not call. At some point, I stopped expecting them to. One afternoon, Laura handed me a new set of keys. "Storage building access," she said. "There are things there you should see." I drove alone for the first time since arriving. The storage building was behind the main property, partially hidden by trees. Inside, I found organized shelves filled with labeled boxes. Each one had a year written on it. I opened the first box and found photographs, handwritten notes, and small personal items from people I did not know. At the bottom of one box, I found something that made me stop completely. A framed photo of Evelyn standing beside a group of children, all smiling, all holding small handmade crafts. On the back, she had written a date from only a few years ago. She had been here this recently. I stood there longer than I realized. When I returned to the center that evening, Robert noticed immediately that something had changed in me. "You saw more today," he said. I nodded. "I think I am starting to see properly for the first time." He did not respond, but he did not need to. That night, I placed the badge on the kitchen table in the house and sat across from it. For the first time, I did not feel like I was standing outside of Evelyn's life anymore. I felt like I had finally stepped into a part of it that had been waiting for me to arrive, even if I had come much later than I should have. And as I sat there in the quiet, I realized that the life I thought had ended weeks ago was still unfolding in a direction I was only beginning to understand. Right as the present moment slowly began to reconnect with everything I had learned since stepping through that old rusted gate. I had not been back to Charleston in days, but that morning the call came anyway. It was Robert. His voice was lower than usual, more controlled. "Thomas, they are here," he said. I did not ask who he meant. I already knew. "Where?" I asked. "The center," he replied. "Your children arrived an hour ago." For a moment, I just sat there, holding the phone without speaking. Then I looked at the badge still on my desk. Thomas Walker, Field Coordinator. I had almost forgotten I was wearing it in my mind, even when I was not physically there. "I will come," I said. The drive back felt different from the first time. Then, I had been uncertain, carrying grief and confusion. Now I was carrying something else. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to clarity. When I arrived, I saw them immediately. Jennifer was standing near the entrance, arms crossed, her expression tight with frustration. Michael was pacing slightly behind her. Daniel stood farther back, avoiding eye contact. When Jennifer saw me, she walked straight toward me. "Dad, what is going on?" she asked without greeting. I stopped a few feet away. "You are here," I said calmly. "Of course we are here," Michael interrupted. "You stopped responding. You refused to sign anything. The realtor is waiting on your approval." I looked at all three of them. It felt strange how familiar they looked and how distant they suddenly seemed. "You should not have come like this," I said. Jennifer exhaled sharply. "We came because you are not acting like yourself." That sentence landed differently than she intended. Robert stepped forward from behind me. "He is acting more like himself than you realize," he said quietly. Michael turned toward him. "We did not come here to argue with strangers," he said. Robert did not react. He simply looked at me. "They need to see it," he said. Jennifer frowned. "See what?" she asked. I hesitated. For the first time, I understood that whatever happened next would change the way they saw everything. I gestured toward the building. "Come inside," I said. They followed reluctantly. The air inside was still and organized. The same papers, the same structure, but now it felt heavier with presence. People working inside paused when they saw us. Laura looked up from her desk and nodded slightly at me, acknowledging the moment without interrupting it. Jennifer noticed immediately. "Who are all these people?" she asked. "This is not a property tour, Dad." I looked at her. It never was. Michael stepped forward. "We are not here for explanations," he said. "We are here because this needs to be resolved." I met his eyes. "It already has been," I replied. That made him pause. Daniel finally spoke, quieter than the others. "Dad, we just want to understand why you are refusing to sell." I looked at him for a long moment. "Because I finally understand what this place is," I said. Jennifer let out a short laugh. "It is a house," she said. "It has always been a house." Robert stepped closer to me again, his voice low. "Do you want them to see it now?" he asked. I hesitated. Not because I was unsure anymore, but because I knew there was no going back after this point. "Yes," I said. We walked toward the back room together. The hallway felt narrower than before, or maybe it was just the weight of what was about to be revealed. Jennifer followed first, then Michael, then Daniel. The door at the end of the hall was slightly open. Laura stood beside it. She looked at me once, then stepped aside. "They should hear it from you," she said quietly. I placed my hand on the door. I could hear voices inside the room, but I could not make out words yet. Michael leaned forward slightly. "What is this?" he asked. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I looked at all three of my children standing behind me. For the first time since Evelyn died, I felt completely certain that everything I had discovered, everything I had learned, everything I had been shown, was leading to this exact moment. I pushed the door open slowly, and as the voices inside grew clearer, I realized that what they were about to see on the other side was something none of them had ever been prepared for. The room fell completely silent the moment I stepped inside. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the kind that comes when something undeniable is finally standing in front of you. Jennifer was the first to move forward, but she stopped halfway. Her eyes were fixed on the walls, on the tables, on the people inside the room who did not look like visitors or workers, but like they belonged there more than we did. "Dad," she said slowly, her voice lower now, almost uncertain. Michael followed her gaze, scanning the documents laid across the table. His expression shifted slightly as he read one of the headings. Community support records, he muttered. Daniel did not speak at first. He just stepped closer to a wall filled with photographs, his hand hovering near them without touching. One of the volunteers stood up from her chair and looked directly at me. You brought your family, she said calmly, as if acknowledging something she had been expecting for a long time. I nodded once. They needed to see it, I replied. Jennifer turned sharply toward me. See what exactly? She asked. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I gestured toward the center of the room. Ask them, I said quietly. Robert stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. This organization has been operating here for nearly 3 decades, he said. His voice was steady, almost clinical. Funded, organized, and expanded under Evelyn Walker's direction. Michael frowned. That is impossible, he said immediately. My mother did not run anything like this. Laura, standing near the back of the room, finally spoke. She did not want recognition, she said. That is different from not doing it. Jennifer shook her head slightly. You are telling us she secretly built all of this without telling her own family? Laura nodded. Yes. The word landed heavily. Daniel looked at me now, not at the room. Dad, did you know? He asked quietly. I held his gaze for a moment. Not until recently, I said. That answer seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. Michael walked slowly toward a table covered in ledgers. He opened one and began reading. His expression changed as he flipped through the pages. These are financial records, he said. Donations, housing assistance, medical support. This is not a small project. Robert stepped beside him. It never was, he replied. Jennifer walked toward the photographs again, this time stopping directly in front of one. Her face softened slightly as she studied it. She is in all of these, she said quietly. I moved closer. In the photograph she was looking at, Evelyn stood surrounded by people I did not recognize, but she looked completely at ease, like she had been exactly where she was supposed to be. Jennifer turned to me. Why would she hide this from us? She asked, but her tone had changed. It was no longer accusatory. It was searching. I took a slow breath. Because she believed you would measure it differently than she did, I said. Michael closed the ledger gently, almost carefully. And what exactly did she believe we would do? He asked. I met his eyes. She believed you would turn it into something to sell. The room did not react loudly. There were no raised voices, no sudden movements. Instead, there was a kind of stillness that felt heavier than argument. Daniel stepped back slightly, as if needing space to process what he was seeing. So everything here, he said slowly, was real? Laura answered before I could. It is still real. Jennifer looked at me again, but this time her expression had changed completely. Not anger. Not disbelief. Something closer to discomfort mixed with realization. Dad? She said quietly. Why are you here then? I paused. That was the first question that did not have an immediate answer rooted in confusion or defense. I looked around the room, at the people working, at the records, at the structure Evelyn had built without my knowledge. Then I looked back at my children. Because I am finally seeing what she saw, I said. Michael exhaled slowly, lowering his eyes. We did not know, he said, but it sounded less like a defense and more like an admission of distance. Jennifer did not respond. She was still looking at the photographs. Daniel stepped forward again, this time more slowly. So what happens now? He asked. No one answered immediately. Even Robert stayed silent. I looked at the folders still open on the table, then at the room around us, then at my children standing in the middle of something they had already misjudged before they even walked in. And for the first time since this entire journey began, I realized that the truth was no longer something waiting to be discovered. It was already standing in front of all of us, changing everything in ways none of us were ready to speak out loud yet. I did not speak for a long time after the room went quiet again. The truth had already entered the space, but it had not yet settled in the way people expected. Jennifer stood near the photographs, her arms no longer crossed, but lowered at her sides as if she had forgotten what to do with them. Michael kept looking at the ledger on the table, but he was no longer reading it. Daniel had moved closer to the wall again, staring at one specific photograph like it might change if he looked long enough. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence. Dad, why did she never tell us any of this? She asked, but her voice was softer now. Not defensive, more uncertain. I looked at her for a moment before answering. Because she did not build it for approval, I said. She built it because she believed it needed to exist. Michael closed the ledger slowly and placed it down with care, like he was afraid even the sound might be disrespectful now. So all those years we thought she was just... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Robert stepped forward slightly. She asked us not to involve you until after she was gone, he said. Jennifer turned toward him immediately. You knew her? Robert nodded. For a long time. That answer seemed to shift something in the room again. Daniel finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. So everything we said about selling the property, he did not finish either. I turned toward him. You said what you believed, I replied calmly. You just did not know what you were speaking about. That sentence did not carry anger. It carried distance. A recognition that not everything needed to be argued anymore. Jennifer walked slowly toward me now. For the first time since they arrived, she did not look like she was trying to convince me of anything. Dad, what happens to this now? She asked. I glanced around the room. People were still working. Nothing had stopped. No one was waiting for permission. That realization mattered more than anything else. It continues, I said simply. Michael frowned slightly. And the house? He asked. I looked at him directly. It does not belong to a conversation anymore, I said. The words were calm, but they created a clear boundary in the air between us. Daniel exhaled slowly. We were wrong, he said quietly. It was not dramatic. It was not forced. Just a fact finally spoken out loud. Jennifer did not argue with him. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at me. We thought we were helping, she said. I nodded. I know. That was all I said. Robert moved toward the table and gently closed one of the folders. She prepared for moments like this, he said. I looked at him. She expected this reaction? I asked. Robert nodded. Not because she doubted you, he replied. Because she understood how quickly people decide what something is worth when they do not see its purpose. That sentence stayed in the room longer than anything else had. Jennifer took a step back and sat down in one of the chairs, suddenly looking tired in a way I had not seen before. So what now? She asked again, but this time it was not about property or decisions. It was about direction. I looked at all three of my children. For years I had answered them quickly, softened things for them, adjusted myself around their expectations. But standing in this room, surrounded by something I was only beginning to understand, I realized I no longer had to do that. Now you decide what you are willing to understand, I said quietly. Michael looked at me for a long moment. And if we do not understand it the way you do? He asked. I shook my head slightly. Then you do not have to be part of it, I replied. There was no hostility in my voice. Only clarity. That answer seemed to unsettle them more than disagreement would have. Daniel stepped closer to Jennifer, as if grounding himself beside her. None of them spoke after that. The room remained still, but the weight inside it had changed. It was no longer about discovery. It was about separation. What each of us chose to carry forward from this moment would not be the same. Jennifer finally looked up at me again. Dad, she said slowly, are you staying here? I did not answer immediately, because for the first time, I understood that the question was not about geography. It was about identity, and I had not fully decided who I was going to be in the world that Evelyn had left behind. And as I stood there in the quiet space between my past and everything I was beginning to inherit from her absence, I realized that nothing about our family would remain unchanged after this moment, even if none of us were ready to admit it yet. I stayed in Tybee Island longer than I ever planned. The house no longer felt like an inheritance or a burden, but like something I was learning to respect in real time. Every morning, I walked through the rooms, not looking for what I had missed in the past, but for what was still living in the present. The work at the center continued to grow, and for the first time in years, I was not waiting for permission from anyone to be useful. Robert stopped by less often, not because he was leaving, but because he no longer needed to guide me through every step. One morning, he looked at me while I was reviewing a schedule and said quietly, "You are not the same man who walked through that gate." I did not respond immediately. I just kept writing notes on the paper in front of me. No, I finally said, I am not. And I realized I did not mean it as loss. I meant it as understanding. My children eventually returned. Not all together, not with the same certainty they had carried before. Jennifer arrived first. She did not speak much when she came inside. She just looked around the center, slowly, as if trying to reconcile memory with reality. Michael followed her, more reserved than before, holding a folder I did not ask about. Daniel stood near the entrance for a long time before stepping in fully. Jennifer finally broke the silence. We did not see it, she said. It was not an excuse. It was an admission. I nodded once. No, I said gently. You did not. Michael stepped forward slightly. What happens to everything now, he asked. I looked around the room, at the people working, at the names on the boards, at the quiet rhythm of something that had been continuing long before any of us arrived at this moment. It continues, I said. Jennifer looked at me more carefully this time. And you? She asked. I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because the answer no longer belonged to confusion. It belonged to choice. I stay, I said simply. There was no argument after that. No resistance. Just acceptance in different forms, each of them processing in their own way. Before they left, Daniel approached me quietly. Dad, he said, I think we finally understand what Mom was trying to protect. I placed my hand lightly on the edge of the table. She was not protecting the house, I said. She was protecting what people become when they stop seeing value in things they cannot measure. He nodded slowly, then stepped back. After they left, the house felt different again, but not empty. It felt settled, like something had been placed back where it belonged. That evening, I walked alone toward the shoreline. The air was calm, and the ocean moved without urgency. I reached into my pocket and felt the small brass key Evelyn had left behind. It was still there, unchanged, carrying the same quiet weight it always had. I thought about everything she never explained, and everything I had only just begun to understand. And I realized something I had not been ready to accept before. She had not left me behind. She had been guiding me towards something I was finally strong enough to see. If there is one thing I learned through all of this, it is that people are not defined by what they leave behind in plain sight, but by what they choose to protect when no one is watching. And sometimes, the truth does not arrive to comfort you. It arrives to wake you up. If you are listening to this and carrying something you do not fully understand yet, I want you to remember this. Not everything that feels like loss is meant to break you. Some things are meant to rebuild you in a way you were never prepared for. Trust what you feel when everything else is unclear. There is a quiet kind of truth that does not shout. It waits. And when it finally reaches you, it changes everything. My name is Thomas Walker. I am 74 years old, and the only lesson I can leave you with is this. Do not let others define the value of what you have not yet understood. Not your life. Not your love. Not your purpose. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If this story touched you in any way, I am grateful you were here to listen. Sometimes we do not realize how alone we feel until we hear someone else say what we have been carrying inside. If you feel comfortable, share your thoughts in the comments, or simply leave where you are watching from. And if you would like to hear more stories like this, there are others waiting for you here, each one carrying its own quiet lesson, its own moment of truth, its own path toward understanding what it means to let go and begin again.